and to those who are following this by internet. We shall be giving the floor to the head of the delegation of the State Party to respond to the questions of the second segment and the follow-up responses. Mr. Itunsut, you have the floor.
Madam Chair, distinguished member of the committee, good morning and bonjour. My delegation is ready to answer the questions remaining from yesterday and question in chapter 2 as well. I've asked all members of my delegation to keep their answer short and simple to allow sufficient time for interaction. May I now invite Director General Somchai to answer question for section 15 of the PDEA and our efforts to reach a person with disability in the most area and non-Thais. Please.
Thank you. Good morning, Madam Chair, distinguished committee, and ladies and gentlemen. Due to the limited time yesterday, I could not complete my answer concerning the remaining question, so that I would like to fill more information on that. First, yesterday one of the members of the committee questioned that we had such a small number of complaints at 28. Allow me to clarify that 28 is for complaint on discrimination against persons with disabilities, refer to the subcommittee under the same name only. The number of all complaints through various channels on all issues related to persons with disability is much greater than that. For example, from 1300 hotline service, only in 2015 there are almost 3,000 complaints ranging from issues related to disability identification card registration, disability allowance, financial support, and domestic violence. A lot of these were resolved through reconciliation among parties concerned. Some went further to the court. I mentioned yesterday some examples of the court's decision that have set good precedents. My colleagues from the Ministry of Justice will also elaborate further later about persons with disability to receive legal assistance, including financial compensation and witness protection from the government. Another on Section 15, Paragraph 3 of the Person with Disabilities Empowerment Act, the Subcommittee on Disability Legislation to be set up that I mentioned yesterday will consider all the detail and proposal related to necessary amendments to the Act in line with the CRPD, including this one. For disability ID card, at present, our successful universal health coverage provides basic health care to various groups of people, including undocumented migrants, based on humanitarian principles. The Department of Empowerment of Persons with Disability is well aware of the need to plan and think about persons with disabilities residing in Thailand who may be non-Thai citizens and in need of similar care. The department is therefore in the process of considering the plan to offer another type of disability ID card for non-Thai citizens. The card holders will be entitled to some of the benefits that line agencies are already to provide. Though at the beginning stage, such benefits may not be equal to those who are Thai citizens. On effort to reach out the person with disabilities in remote area, the DEP support the establishment of the General Disability Service Centers run by DPO and the Provincial Disability Service Center in all 77 provinces run by the government. The Ministry of Social Development and Human Security and the Ministry of Public Health have also provided mobile services such as health treatment, the production and repair of assistive devices and equipment, as well as awareness raising on their rights and health care for persons with disabilities and their family in remote areas. This should help us reach out and get more persons with disabilities registered in the provinces as well as in the remote area. About the abandonment of children and trafficking of children with disabilities, on the legal side, the Thai Criminal Code clearly prohibits the abandonment of children and persons with disability with special needs. Section 306 prohibits the abandonment of child. Section 307 prohibits the abandonment of a person due to his or her age, sickness, or disability, in the manner likely to endanger his or her life. Violation of these two sections would subject a person to an imprisonment of up to 3 years and or fine of up to $200. Section 25 of the Child Protection Act of 2003 also forbids acts of parents and caregivers in the abandonment of a child with the intention of not taking him or her back. The government has also taken other measures to support parents and children with disabilities in child care in a sustainable manner, which will in turn minimize the risk of child abandonment. This includes, first, training to raise awareness and understanding on children with disabilities and their specific needs among families and the community. And second, the establishment of networks for parents of children with disabilities to be a venue for parents to learn about child rearing and share one another's experiences. The networks also conduct rehabilitation activities for children with disabilities. An example for a highly successful one is the Association of Parents of Persons with Autism, which is very active and has its branches nationwide. Each year, the Ministry of Social Development and Human Security has allocated around $333,000 from the Fund for the Empowerment of Persons with Disability to support the operation of organizations of persons with disabilities and parents networks. On trafficking in person, in 2015, there were total 471 cases, of which 236 were children. Unfortunately, we don't have the disaggregated number of children victims with disabilities. The amendment of the Criminal Code to criminalize child pornography also accords more protection for children from wider range of exploitation. In compliance with the CRC and its second optional protocol, it gives, for the first time in Thai law, definition to child pornography and takes into account the advanced technology of visual representation and the spread of child pornography on the Internet. This involves new technique in police investigation, and the Royal Thai Police has sought and started cooperation with other countries, including Switzerland, in this area. On how government take into consideration the recommendations of the National Human Rights Commission, I have shared one case with the committee yesterday on land right reforms office denial to issue land title to persons with disability. The government amended resolution in line with the NHRCT recommendation. Apart from complaint mechanism, the NHRC in Thailand has an important role in advocacy and follow-up on the promotion and protection of the rights of persons with disabilities. The Department of Empowerment of Persons with Disability has worked in cooperation with the NHRCT on various issues. In September last year, the Department together with other government agencies, the NHRCT, Civil Society, Persons with Disabilities and Interested People, and public consultation on the empowerment of persons with disabilities. This aims to promote correct understanding and identify challenges of the implementation of the provision concerning employment of persons with disabilities in the Empowerment Act. According to the recommendation by NHRCT, the government should make available medical technology that help to eliminate barriers to the daily living of persons with disability. Following to this recommendation, Ministry of Public Health today provides accommodation and various assistive devices and services to facilitate independent living of persons with disabilities via the funds of National Health Security Office, Department of Comptroller General and Social Security. I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Samchai. I would like to give floor to the question number 2 to Ms. Vijitra from Social Development and Human Security Ministry, please.
Good morning, Madam Chair and the committee member. I wish to respond to the committee question regarding Article 19 on independent living. One of the end goals of empowering persons with disability is to enable them to live independently. To achieve this, the Fund for Empowerment of Persons with Disability provides financial support to any person with disability wishing to hire a personal assistant. This allows them to stay and be a part of their own community rather than living in one of government's assistance housings. The Department of Empowerment of Persons with Disability has published a handbook for personal assistance and website with a list of available personal assistance. Madam Chair, Department of Empowerment of Persons with Disability will consider the possibility of provide financial support to parents of children with disability as recommended by the NHRC. Meanwhile, some form of financial assistance to parents of the children with or without disability are already available, such as the Early Child Support Grant and the Emergency Care Assistance to support children and families in difficult situations. The Department of Empowerment of Persons with Disability also offers financial assistance to the Organization of Persons with Disability to settle independent living center to provide training for persons with disability on how to live independently and be truly integrated in the society. The centers also arrange peer counseling sessions to help persons with disability, especially during the transitional period, which they start living by themselves or with an assistant. In addition, the Department of Empowerment of Persons with Disability supports the work of Disability Service Center established by the Organization of Persons with Disability to carry out training for persons with disability to build skills necessary for independent living, such as orientation and mobility training for the visually impaired, sign language training for persons with hearing impairment, and self-advocacy training for persons with intellectual impairment. Under the community-based rehabilitation, the Department of Empowerment of Persons with Disability have organized awareness raising program to encourage the society to be more open to persons with disability. Currently, there are over 600 volunteers in the different community countries while who will help persons with disability and work with different sectors of the society to eliminate discrimination against persons with disability. Thank you.
Thank you. The question number 3 regarding the inclusion of persons with disability in our work on the disaster risk reduction. May I give a floor to Ms. Patcharamon from the Ministry of Social Development and Human Security, please.
Thank you. Thailand has several policies regarding the disaster risk management. The National Disaster Prevention and Mitigation Plan covers all groups of people, age, sex, and vulnerabilities. In line with the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction 2015 to 2030, the Department of Disaster Prevention and Surinthorn National Medical Rehabilitation Institute to draft a disaster management plan with a focus on medical and public health service for persons with disabilities, which focus on preparedness, response, and resilience. Disabled people organization in all 7 types of persons with disabilities, as well as related relevant agencies, has been involved in development of this plan. Section 5 of the National Plan regarding emergency support function sets the priority to persons with disabilities, elderly persons, children, and women to be moved first in risk situation. This section also provides guidelines of the damage and needs assessment. Department of Empowerment of Persons with Disabilities has also organized disaster prevention activities for persons with disabilities, families, and communities. Key elements of self-preparedness and network management plan in risk situation. A guideline on disaster preparedness for persons with disability in flood situation was developed as a result of major floods in the past. The public would learn how to assist persons with disabilities in such situation also. Thank you.
Thank you. We go to the question number 4 regarding to the access to the justice measure in court proceeding to assist persons with disability. May I invite Ms. On from Ministry of Justice to give a floor, please.
Good morning. I would like to answer the question regarding access to justice. On accessibility to court building, according to Cabinet resolutions on 20 November 2011, all government agencies shall provide accessible facility and environment for persons with disabilities. Court buildings are no exception. Therefore, new court facilities are accessible for persons with disabilities. Ministry of Justice provides legal assistance to persons with disability from October 2008 to September 2015. 431 cases has been rendered legal assistance, including 239 cases of legal advice, 28 cases of financial assistance via justice fund for royal fees, court fees, or bail payments, and 163 cases of financial compensation to persons with disabilities who are victims of various criminal offences. Recently, the Justice Fund Act has been enacted in 2015 and will be effective next month. This act provides legal assistance to everyone, particularly the poor and the vulnerable, including persons with disabilities. Moreover, the Criminal Procedure Code stipulates specific measures to facilitate persons with disabilities in judicial proceedings. For example, Section 13 requires the inquiry official, public prosecutor, or the court to provide a sign language interpreter or communicate in way that fits for the accused or witness who cannot speak, hear, or communicate. To increase the availability of sign interpreters, the court had organized training those wishing to work as sign interpreters in its proceeding. As a matter of principle, appropriate, reasonable accommodation will be provided for persons with disabilities throughout the process of judicial proceeding. In addition, special judicial proceedings are provided for persons with specific needs. For example, cases involving children and youth, including children with disability, are tried in the juvenile and family court, with judges and personnel specializing in children's rights. According to the principle of the law of Thai law, a person's legal capacity to enter into contact is based on his or her ability, not his or her disabilities. Be they physical or intellectual disabilities, as far as the person's has ability to understand the full meaning and effects of the contact. Such person can do contacts according to his or her will. Persons with disability therefore have equal legal capacity as others. Complication may arise when it comes to persons with mental and or intellectual disability. The Criminal Procedure Code, as well as Section 35 and 36 of the Mental Health Act 2008, require the inquiry officials or the court in case there is a reason to believe that the alleged offender or the accused is of unsound mind and is unable to put up a defense, to transfer the person to be diagnosed the mental disorder by the psychiatrist before adjust the person's incompetent. According to the laws, the inquiry officer or the court can provisionally or definitively suspend the inquiry or trial of the person who is found to be of unsound mind or unable to put up a defense after examination by medical officer until the person is recovered. It has also been a practice that physicians or experts on intellectual disabilities be invited to the court if the court needs further comments or opinion after the initial medical assessment. This practice helps ensure that the court correctly understanding and give true and fair consideration to persons with intellectual disabilities, taking into account their different degree of disabilities when they are in the court. For public security and safety of the offenders with psychosocial disability, if the court is of opinion that the liberation of any person due to his intellectual disability who is not punishable or whose punishment is reduced will not be safe for the public, the court may order to send such person to a hospital. This order may, however, be revoked at any time by the court. Thank you.
Thank you. The question number 5 go to Ministry of Public Health concerning the forced sterilization and institutional care for children. I would like to invite Dr. Dharani and Dr. Busakon to answer this question, please.
Good morning, Madam Chair and all committee members. We would like to reply in the area of forced sterilization. There are two areas to present. There are children with disability and women with mental disabilities. In Thailand, forced sterilization is prohibited by law, particularly the Mental Health Act of 2008 and the guidelines of the Thai Medical Council to talk about the patient life base. Every case of sterilization have to sign a consent after the patient or parents of a minor have been informed all details such as necessities, risks, and benefits of treatment. These laws and regulations apply to every case, including persons with disability. Firstly, in case of children with disability, in practice, a family planning doctor usually informs all details of sterilization as well as alternative methods to ensure supported decision-making. Regarding children with disability, parents can legally make decisions on treatment given they are considered minors by law. In our context, children with disability from low-income families in rural areas are usually left by themselves at home because the parents have to work outside, thereby increasing risk of sexual abuse and unwanted pregnancy. Therefore, some parents decided to have their children sterilized. Most cases of sterilization were results of parents' decision and consent rather than physician advice. In case of women and mental with disability have legal protection to their productive lives. According to the Mental Health Act of 2008, has the clear guidelines on the sterilization of women with mental disabilities. In Section 19, clearly prohibits forced sterilization except whom the patient gives written consent for treatment after she has been informed risks, necessity, and benefits of the treatment. Additional safeguards in Section 12 to 14, which require each hospital to appoint the infirmary board, which consists of a psychiatrist, physician, psychiatric nurse, lawyer, medical, social worker, and a clinical psychologist, to be a body that has the power to access and give opinions on the treatment. Nevertheless, in actual practice, there are still some inconsistency resulting from human resource leakage in remote areas. Some ideas we have in mind include 1. The provisions of a multidisciplinary team approach consisting of experts from different fields such as a psychiatrist, family planning doctor, a social worker, and a lawyer, as well as parents, in order to ensure advice given the patient would be well balanced, life-based, and more responsive to specific needs of the patient. Number 2, given the issue of sterilization involves triangular partnership among doctors, parents, and patients, fostering understanding among all the parties. Number 3, in case of low-income families, we should enhance family awareness of need for protection against sexual abuse, such as need some compensation for parents to take care of children. Thank you so much.
Madam Chair, Committee and distinguished delegates, I would like to reply the 2 questions about the lack of psychiatric admission unit in the small hospitals and how to shift institutional model to society-based or community-based model. On behalf of the Ministry of Public Health, recently we solved these problems with various methods, such as conducting the psychiatric nurse training program and common psychiatric problems training programs for general practitioners in rural area, and developing pilot projects about community psychiatric ward, particularly in limited regions. But we plan to spread these effective projects throughout the country. We also try to develop the proper referral system for these patients with psychosocial disability and child with disability who develop crisis conditions. Ministry of Public Health supports the policies of community-based rehabilitation or CBR for all types of disabilities in various patterns, such as promoting rehabilitation center for children with disabilities in communities, which all stakeholders would work together to brainstorm, design, and consider to handle and overcome their problems. CBR has expanded from the health aspects to education and vocational training to raise the income and sustainability in social and empowerment activities to fulfill all components of CBR matrix. In 2015 to 2016, we conduct the Family Care Team projects, which consists of health personnel, caregiver, and health-related volunteers to promote health concepts of health promotion, disability prevention, and rehabilitation for persons with disabilities throughout the country. So we could summarize that we prefer to transform institutional pattern to society or community-based practices for sustainable development. Another challenge surrounding the issue is how to enhance capabilities of family members or caregivers to provide proper care and promote independent living for our persons with disabilities. Ministry of Public Health, together with other relevant agencies, have tried to raise awareness and foster correct understanding on persons with disability, especially psychosocial disabilities among people in society. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Buskon. May I turn to educational aspect regarding children with intellectual disability in boarding school and corporal punishment on children. I would like to invite Mr. Samad, representative from Ministry of Education, please.
Thank you and good morning, Madam Chair. So I'm going to touch a little bit about the punishment. In Thailand, is aware of the child rights. The Ministry of Education issued a regulation on the punishment of students 2005. Prevented teachers from physically punishing students in all means, including persons with disabilities. All schools throughout the country are aware of this and encouraged to provide positive discipline to, for example, for like a community work. If students with the disability are physically punished, teacher can be charged with the discipline measure and criminal penalty. In overall, after 2005, punishing in school have been well aware and finally became rare in Thailand. So for the boarding school in for students with this intellectual disability, students with intellectual disability are provided with the flexible schooling. The concept of these schools are to provide more opportunities for these students to access to education. A parent and a student can choose between enrolling in a day school or boarding school are provided. Currently, we have 20 of these schools are full enrolled because in school age children we have 28.8 of school age children have intellectual disability. So 20 schools are not enough for the needs of students and the parents. These boarding schools accommodate students living in the property or living distance away from school. For the curriculum, we understand that our students with ID has a problem with the generalized what they have learned to use in the real life. So we work collaboratively with the parents, communities, local governments, and private sectors have created a transition from school to work programs for our students. In reality, students with ID in this school enjoy meaningful activities and living with their peers. Furthermore, more than 80% of our students got a job after graduation. if you want to see, you can visit our website transitionasia.com. You will see how we work in the boarding school. Thank you.
The question number 7 regarding violence against women, including especially women in the rural areas, may invite Mrs. Aruni, disability expert, to answer this question, please.
Okay. Good morning, Madam Chair and distinguished guests. Regarding women with disabilities and domestic violence, in Thailand, women with disabilities are protected under the laws and support system through various mechanisms, such as the Domestic Violence Act 2007, which covers and protects all individuals, including women with disabilities. So under this act, women with disabilities who live in the household, and including those who have potential risk of harm, abuses, and coercion, can be protected under this law. The penalty for those violating this law include the imprisonment or fine or both, and the court may order the offender to pay compensation to the victim. Being aware of the difficulties that women with disabilities may face, the government tries to offer the most reachable services to help this group, which include the hotline services, because the Ministry of Social Development and Human Security has the 1300 hotline service, where people with disabilities who experience any difficulty or complaints can call, and then the appropriate support shall be given. And in the rural and remote areas, there are health volunteers provided by the Ministry of Public Health. These health volunteers pay home visit to persons with disabilities who live in their houses, and the services include the physical therapy or give advice to persons with disabilities and their families, and because they are neighbors, and in many cases they visit the houses of persons with disability regularly, and they talk, and then persons with disabilities have built a trust, and sometimes they share the experiences of domestic violence that they have. And because most of these health volunteers are women, sometimes the women with disabilities have the trust and talk about the domestic violence that they experience, or sometimes the health volunteers know about this or observe, and then they report the cases, and then women with disabilities are given the support. And for women with severe disabilities who are also potential victims, they can get services from the independent living centers. These centers serve persons with severe disabilities in all areas of Thailand. The services include peer counseling, home visit, and personal assistant training. And through these services, they also outreach the person with disabilities living in every part of the country, including the ethnic minorities. Women who belong to ethnic groups also get this kind of services through the health volunteers at the local level, also as well as the independent living services, because the services are provided mostly by persons with disabilities who help other persons with disabilities through the services like peer counseling or home visit, and also the training for personal assistant. So these are the channels that women with disabilities in the countryside or in every part of the country can get support from the government. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Aruni. Madam Chair, The last question about the Myanmar displaced person. May I ask a representative of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to answer this question? Please, Mrs. Kanchana.
Thank you, Permanent Secretary. Madam Chairperson, committee members. Presently, Thailand hosts about 110,000 Myanmar displaced persons in 9 camps along the Thai and Myanmar border. These people have been here for over 30 years. In fact, many were born here. The number used to be higher, but many have been resettled to third countries. Unfortunately, I don't have the number of persons with disabilities among this group on hand. Normally, healthcare services are provided for everyone in the camps by the Thai government in collaboration with civil society organizations such as Médecins Sans Frontières and Care International. In case of severe illnesses, they can be referred to local public hospitals. Several agencies, both government and civil society organizations, have also provided some specific assistance to persons with disabilities in the camps. For example, the Mae Pha Luang Foundation, which is a civil society organization in Thailand, provided artificial limbs to the displaced persons and training on the production of artificial limbs and other assistive devices to local hospitals in order to provide the necessary services to those in the camps. We at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Ministry of Interior also have facilitated regular visits to the camps by UN organizations and representatives of embassies in Thailand to visit the displaced persons and to observe the conditions of the camps. Given the current development inside Myanmar, the Thai government has been working with different partners, including the Office of the High Commissioner for Refugees and civil society organizations, to prepare the displaced persons for an eventual return home with dignity when the situation allows. For example, we have been providing occupational skills development so that they will have means to earn their livelihood in the future. Thank you, committee members.
Thank you. Madam Chair, I think my delegation has tried our best to keep answer on time, to provide precise answer to all questions in cluster 2. I think I finished in the cluster 2 already.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. My thanks to Mr. Intusut, the head of the Thai delegation. I would also like to extend my special thanks to the delegation for having tried to compress their answers so that they were appropriate for the committee's purposes. This meant that you were able to stick to your allotted time, and at the same time you gave us clear answers. We'll now move on to the third cluster of questions from the members of the committee. They will cover Articles 21 to 33 of the Convention. I would like to give the floor to Mr. Stig Langvad.
Thank you very much. Ooh, this is difficult. I have a disability in my eyes today. Okay. Is it possible for persons with disabilities to purchase a health insurance provided by the private insurance companies? And if it is not, what are the state party planning to do about this? That was for Article 25. In Article 27/28, if a person with a disability becomes employed, their social status change and thereby, to my understanding, there are limited incentives for employment because of loss of social services. Is that correct? And what are you intending to do about that in the future? In relation to Article 27, there are obligations for public entities to employ persons with disabilities, but there are no sanctions if public entities does not do that. And it seems as if it is difficult for persons with disabilities to become employed by the public entities because of reasons like they are not well trained, well skilled, or otherwise. What will the state party do about that in the future? And my final question is, what steps are being taken to ensure data collection systematically desegregated by, among others, violence, political participation, health, education, employment, including indigenous people and refugees with disabilities? And are you taking into consideration the newly developed Sustainable Development Goals within your national statistics concerning persons with disabilities? Thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you very much. Mr. Jonas Ruskus, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a couple of questions for this third cluster. First, on Article 28, following up Article 19. A great number of large institutions for persons and children, adults and children with disabilities still exist in Thailand. At the same time, a lot of persons with disabilities are living by oneself without any assistance and support. For those with serious disabilities, it leads to neglect and poverty. The support of state to families having members with disabilities is less than insignificant and could be considered as nonchalant. Please inform what specific measures Thai government designed to support families having members with disabilities and persons with disabilities living by oneself in order to tackle poverty and neglect and to have a decent life within the community. How does the state party intend to replace institutionalization with support and comprehensive independent living and community-based services? My second question is on Article 24. General education system is still inaccessible for children with disabilities. One major obstacle to provide inclusive quality education to children with disabilities in Thailand is a lack of teachers, staff and school administration personnel with proper knowledge and skills to ensure inclusive education. What measures are planned in Thailand to include values and methods of inclusive education into teachers' training curriculum in order to have proper competences for quality inclusive education? How much annual budget has a state party allocated to make the general education system more accessible and inclusive for persons with disabilities when compared to the budget being used to run special education school system? Thank you very much.
Gracias, señor.
Thank you very much. Ms. Teresia Degana, you have the floor, madam.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have two questions regarding Article 24 and Article 33. But before I can pose my questions, I need to say that I was a little bit irritated yesterday by the way the head of the Thai government delegation introduced one of the female disabled members of the delegation, and my irritation was reinforced by a statement by the Thai DPOs which reached us this morning. And because DPOs are not allowed to speak in this dialogue, I'm not reading the whole statement, but I would like to just read 3 sentences. The head of the Thai government delegation showed disrespect towards one of the female delegates with disability by making fun of her when he invited her to speak before the United Nations Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. The civil society organization representatives of persons with disabilities from Thailand feel that we must voice our serious disapproval to such an act, as it degrades the dignity and the value of a human being. Such an act reflects a lack of knowledge and understanding, as well as the lack of awareness of the human dignity and the rights of persons with disabilities on the part of the head of the delegation who represents Thailand, which goes against the spirit and the letter of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. With this, I would like to change now to my 2 questions I have. As I said, they relate to Article 24, and I join my colleague Jonas Ruskus on what he has said regarding the lack of quality inclusive education in Thailand. And we have received information that many schools have to rely on charity organizations for helping them to adapt learning materials and provide other materials accessible to disabled learners. And since the right to inclusive education is such a fundamental right and one of the most prominent aims of the SDGs, what is the plan of the government to address this issue? My second question relates to Article 33. We are pleased to hear that Thailand has appointed a national monitoring body, namely the National Human Rights Commission of Thailand, and is the right body in order to mainstream people with disabilities into human rights mechanisms, and that is precisely what the CRPD is all about. But however, I am concerned about the downgrading of the National Human Rights Commission from status A to B in 2015, and I would like to know if the government of Thailand is planning to address the recommendations by the ICC subcommittee on accreditation and strengthen the National Human Rights Commission to be able to discharge its mandate effectively and independently in full compliance with the Paris principles. Thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you very much. Mr. Damjan Tatic, you have the floor, sir.
Gracias, señora presidenta. Well, my dear friend and colleague Jonas has already covered the Article 24 question which I wanted to raise, and what I have to say again, especially when we come to the Article 24, I always think about Senator Buntan, because he's one of the colleagues who works very, very hardly, and is actually one of our members of the working group, along with Teresia and Jonas, a number of other of us working on the draft general comment on the right to inclusive education. So to save up the time, I have just 2 questions left. Question number 1 is the question which I will ask in every single dialogue in this session, because the country I'm coming from, Serbia, is having parliamentary and local elections end of April. So I ask every delegation, and National Organization of Persons with Disabilities are cooperating with authorities to make that process as accessible as possible. So I always like to ask every delegation about the accessibility of election campaigns in their countries. So, for example, if there are TV broadcasted debates of candidates for elections, is there sign language interpretation? Is there captioning? Are the election materials available in Braille print? Are the election materials available in easy-to-read formats? If there are public meetings, is it usual or not to have a sign language interpreter present at those political rallies or round tables or that type of events, and any type of those things would be most valuable, particularly for me and my country in the upcoming period. And my second question, which I also always ask to end up my deliberation with each delegation on a positive note, and this is a dialogue in which we go on it's like a free ticket for a journey around the world. And of course Thailand is a beautiful and very hospitable country, as we have heard yesterday, so I think it's a good opportunity for you to use this and to share with us more information about accessibility of cultural sites and tourism venues in your country, and maybe even share with us some websites where we can get that information, because I do hope one day, I haven't been of course to your country, but I hope one day I will be able maybe to visit you. So thank you, and I wish you a very safe journey home. Thank you very much.
Gracias, señora Ana.
Thank you very much. Ms. Anna Palayath, you have the floor, madam. Thank you, Madam Chair. Please allow me to join my colleague in her reprimand concerning the treatment given by the delegation to one of its members with disabilities. I have to say that it is extremely disappointing to hear this from someone who is leading a delegation. Having said this, I have a follow-up question. This concerns my request for information yesterday concerning exploitation, in particular the trafficking of children, both boys and girls with disabilities, for the purposes of sexual exploitation. I would like to know what measures have been taken by the state party to protect these children from this situation. In addition, I would like to know what are the legal implications, what are the legal consequences of coercive or forced sterilization, or a sterilization which is based on a judge's decision. I would like to know if the other rights of persons who are victims of this sterilization are impacted, and I would also like to know how does the state party ensure access to protection from HIV or other sexually transmitted infections in your country? How do you ensure such protection services are available to persons with disabilities? I wish you a safe journey home. Thank you very much. I give the floor to Ms. Sylvia Kwan.
Señora Presidenta, muy buenos días.
Thank you very much. Good morning. I'd also like to begin my statement by associating myself with the statement that was made to the head of the delegation for the lack of respect towards one of the members of the delegation representing the state party. And I'd also like to say that I personally felt humiliated, and I think and I consider that the committee deserves an apology for this way of addressing a person with a disability because of that person's condition of disability. So having said this, I'd like to move to the substance and follow up on one of the questions that we heard today, replying to a question that we put yesterday, and it's about forced sterilization. It's clear that legislation prohibits forced sterilization, and based on what was said this morning by the delegation, it is the parents, generally mothers, who make this decision, and it's a way of protecting their children because they're alone at home. I would like to clarify that rather than protecting persons with disabilities by sterilizing them. Quite the contrary, one exposes them to, one should avoid the consequences which can be the result of sexual exploitation, sexual abuse, which they can be subjected to. And I'd also like to point out that often the persons with disabilities are victims of violence, of sexual exploitation at the hands of persons who are living with them. So this is a very serious situation, to be sure, and I would like to know, therefore, whether there are different attitudes that are more consistent with the Convention in order to truly protect persons with disabilities, in particular children, women with disabilities, to protect them from violence of all types, but especially from sexual violence. I'm now going to go directly to a question on Article 33, because the other articles have been fairly well covered by my colleagues here in the committee. But I have a doubt about the National Commission for the Empowerment of Persons with Disabilities, which has experts with disabilities among their members, experts in the field of disabilities. I'd like to know what is the criterion which is used by the state party in order to appoint such experts with disabilities. Are there close consultations with associations of persons with disabilities for the appointment of such persons? Next, according to my information, the associations of persons with disabilities in Thailand have submitted to the relevant bodies, competent bodies, certain proposals to reform the legislation and to make it fall in line with the provisions of the Convention. In spite of this, these proposals have been rejected, and I would like to know why they have been rejected. What is the link, therefore, that the consultations of persons with disabilities with the measures and policies in respect of persons with disabilities that are put forward by the state party? I will stop here, and I wish you a good trip back to your country. Thank you very much. Mr. Laszlo Lobasi has the floor.
Thank you. Good morning. First of all, I'd like to also echo colleagues in terms of respecting human dignity, because no one is above this obligation. In relation to Article 21, the State Party has already mentioned that the Thai Telecommunication Relay Service, TTRS, was already implemented to provide access to deaf and hard of hearing people, along with installation of more than 100 kiosks across hospitals, police stations, schools, private or governmental sectors. It is a very promising start and development, I believe. Mr. Bunton is also a well-known and acknowledged expert in the field of telecommunication and IT, so it wasn't a surprise for me at all. I'm absolutely sure that Mr. Bunton might have a better and more sophisticated question here. However, please inform the committee about its funding, any available roadmap to increase the service availability, as well as the legal provision in power in relation to safeguards and procedures to apply for this service on an equal basis. In addition, I wonder how the clients can appeal against discriminatory administration and lodge a complaint at these service providers. My second and last question is about education. In relation to education, and siding with Mr. Ruskus, Mrs. Degener, and Mr. Tatic, I'm wondering there are relevant data in terms of inclusive education with special regard to bilingual education in the state party. My question here relates to the procedure on qualifying teachers in inclusive and or bilingual education. I'm particularly interested in how the government makes sure that teachers are qualified in inclusive education and or in sign language, and how many that of teachers have been employed so far. Finally, there is any roadmap with figures and milestones, in particular in terms of inclusive education. Please share it with us. Since this is my last intervention in this dialogue, I wish you a safe journey. Thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you very much. Mr. Dalami Bacharu has the floor.
So wish to join colleagues in expressing disgust at the undignified manner in which an honorable member of the delegation was introduced yesterday. Having said that, I want to note that my question on Article 12 was not actually answered. And if I may repeat, it was on the issue of Section 152 of the Constitution, which stipulates that persons with disabilities are entitled to representation by a disability expert in the formulation of any laws that affect them both directly and I'm concerned about the fact that a disability expert has to represent persons with disabilities, and I wondered if there was no capacity among persons with disabilities to represent themselves in such a manner. And now to my questions for today. They've actually been dealt with, but I have a specific question on Article 24. What measures has the state party put in place to discourage educational institutions from denying denying admissions to students with disabilities, and what sanctions are in place against such educational institutions that refuse to accept students with disabilities in violation of the law that prohibits discrimination against students with disabilities? And under Article 29, I need more clarification on paragraph 170, where it says, electoral officers on duty at each electoral booth assist and facilitate voting by secret ballot for persons with disabilities. How does this work, in particular for blind voters and amputees? Because voting is meant to be the exercise of the free will of the voter, or if need be, by freely chosen persons. Thank you. Kashe.
Gracias.
Thank you. Ms. Diane Kingston has the floor.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your answers to my previous questions. I didn't feel that you really answered my question on Article 11 as thoroughly as I would have liked, and our Thai member of the committee, Mr. Montian Buntan, has been instrumental in disability inclusive disaster risk reduction, and I know he would also be disappointed with this answer to the question. But today's questions, my first is on respect for privacy. We all know that it's not dignified and an abuse of human rights to be placed without your free and informed consent in a psychiatric institution. So my question is really about respect for privacy within such institutions. We know also within psychiatric institutions in the state party that people undergo psychological violence as well as sexual violence. But in terms of privacy, in large bedded wards, I'd like to know how the respect for privacy is upheld. In relation to Article 31, I would very much like you to provide information on what measures have been taken to collect disaggregated data and statistics, and how statistics and this information is disseminated, whether the information itself is accessible to persons with disabilities, and if you could explain if you've ensured the full participation of persons with disabilities in the process of data collection and research. In relation to Article 32, building on the question asked by my colleague Mr. Stig Langford, I'd like to know what steps have been taken to guarantee that international cooperation is inclusive and accessible by persons with disabilities, and what programs and projects have specifically target persons with disabilities, and what percentage of your total budget is allocated to them in international cooperation, and what action has there been to facilitate and support capacity building, for example by exchanging and sharing information experiences, and training programs and best practices on international cooperation. And finally, if you could state your level of commitment to the inclusion of persons with disabilities in the implementation of the new 2030 Agenda on Development, which was adopted by the General Assembly in September 2015. These are my last questions, so I'd like to thank you for your constructive dialogue and thank civil society and the National Human Rights Institution for their input and thank our own country rapporteur.
Gracias.
Thank you very much. Mr. Liang Yu has the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sorry. And just now, my colleague Dan has already asked most of the questions that I want to ask. But following the data, and also I just want to say that data is very important for governments real data is vital for governments to make plans related to budget, social services. And also I just want to know, how did you obtain the data on disability? Through sampling survey or through conducting the statistics in a face-to-face meeting with the disabilities way? This is the first. And second, my second question is also related to the international cooperation. I know that Bangkok is an international city. Many UN agencies are located there. So my question is that last year, disability and economy has successfully included into the APEC framework. APEC means Asian Pacific Economic Cooperation. And Thailand is one of the members of the APEC. And during that time, and also APEC Group of Friends on Disability was established within the APEC framework. So my question is that, has the state party taken an active measures to get involved in the APEC Group of Friends on Disability so as to empower persons with disabilities economically? My last comment is I really appreciate the state party's efforts in organizing the working group meeting related to the implementation of the entrance strategy. Thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you. Mr. Hyung Shik Kim, Rapporteur, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Your pronunciation of my name is improving. I can see that our committee members are giving tough time to the delegation with challenging questions. So my question is about 28, but I'd like to begin by making a positive comment about the Thai government for implementing disability allowances, because I know Korean persons with disabilities are struggling very hard to really secure a disability allowance. Although we are talking about uplifting right of persons with disabilities, unless we deal with issues of poverty, it becomes rather futile. With that in mind, I'd like to ask a question about your disability allowance. How universal is it? What percentage of persons with disabilities are entitled to it? What does the 800 baht per month really guarantee when you compare with 9,000 baht average workers' income in Thailand? And have you done any poverty study on persons with disability? Thank you.
Gracias.
I thank the rapporteur for the country. Thank you very much. I would like to put a few questions to close this round, the first of which is about Article 26. I would be interested in knowing the percentage of persons with disabilities who have access to comprehensive rehabilitation. I mean to say not only rehabilitation in the area of health, but also education, work, social security, and others. a follow-up question now, which is related to what I asked yesterday. I see in the information that there are numerous recommendations from the Human Rights Commission, National Human Rights Commission, about various articles of the Convention. One thing is to have a monitoring body, and it's an altogether different matter if, in fact, the recommendations of such a body are incorporated into the amendment of measures and the adoption of public policies, etc. Therefore, I put the question once again, what is the channel? How, in other words, can the state party receive the recommendations from the National Human Rights Commission? For example, there are a number of recommendations in respect of inclusive education for persons with disabilities, insertion and so on. Many questions have been put again about Article 24, and I would just like to point out that the Committee on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, in their concluding observations in 2015 for Thailand, also made recommendations about the free, compulsory, inclusive education for children, boys and girls, and this obviously also must be valid for persons with disabilities. I think that sums up the questions that I would like to put at this time. And I would just like to offer one final comment. Yesterday, it was pointed out that, and this is something that is always pointed out in interactive dialogues with countries, that primary prevention is not a part of the topic of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. And what we heard in the second segment of questions, a representative of the Ministry of Health, mentioned once again prevention of disability. I'd like to stress this aspect because the interactive dialogue also tries to be pedagogical. Now, I conclude this segment. We're going to allow 15 minutes for the delegation of the State Party to organize themselves in order to reply. Thank you very much.
Sí, tiene la palabra.
Yes, you have the floor, of course.
Madam Chair, before we end this session, I'd like to give some explanation to the subcommittee who mentioned something about me yesterday. There may have been a misunderstanding on the part of my introduction to a number of my delegates yesterday. My introduction was to encourage, to cheer her before she took a floor. I'm sorry if it is misinterpreted. In fact, we at the Ministry of Human Security and Social Development admire her work, her efforts and attitude. Personally, I have a deep respect for her and for my colleagues and everyone. I would like to understand. I would like to give an explanation to the three committees that we have misinterpreted. Thank you. Thank you.
Damos por concluido.
We conclude this segment. There will be 15 minutes to organize your replies, and we will meet again to listen to you. Thank you.
No.